Hi guys, welcome to Fierce and Pretty. Honey here, and today I'm super excited. It's an early Saturday morning for me here in Finland because I have a special guest today, all the way across from the world, from New Orleans. And if you've been following my channel, I've been doing this series about witchcraft books. And today I finally have my first author of a witchcraft book here. So welcome, Brian Cain.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So everybody, Brian wrote this book, Initiation into Witchcraft. And if you've been following, you've seen a few episodes where I talked about this book. I've talked about the audiobook and then also, of course, this physical book. But let's focus today more with the discussion with Brian. And Brian is not only an author, so he is a high priest of Alexandrian witchcraft in the New Orleans Coven, and he does a lot of things. He is also, yes, of course, a witch. Then he has witchcraft stores with his husband, Christian Day. They have a publishing house, and then Brian has a YouTube show with his fellow high priest Levi Rowland called Covendom, which I love and which I have linked also earlier before. Then Brian loves all things Egypt. He's a dog owner. And, I believe, if I've heard correctly, Brian, you can let me know, you're also part Finnish.
Swedish.
Is that Swedish? Because you've said Finnish twice, so that makes me like, yeah.
It's actually very interesting because I just found out that, through ancestry.com and all of that, that part of my grandmother was from Sweden. My mother's mother was full Swedish, but part of her family were Finnish. So DNA wise, I'm, yes, it's Finnish as well, but it's from my family originates from Sweden. So
that's awesome.
I think we forget that, our families get around, even though your family might have come from Germany or Sweden or England. That doesn't mean that's where they were always from. So yes, I'm part Viking, just like you.
That's amazing.
But I would only be a quarter. So there you go.
Yeah. Here it's so different because, Finnish people have always lived in Finland. We haven't moved. Like American population is so divided, but I'm roughly 18% also Swedish. But I'm
those two seem to have cross-pollinated over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm really excited to have you on the show. And, is there anything that you want to say to the viewers about yourself before we hit into the book?
Well, I definitely, I wrote the book Initiation into Witchcraft because I didn't feel that there was current content in regards to initiates. Most of our books that we love, cherish, and adore were written in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, really, weren't they? So there wasn't a lot of authors publishing books from our perspective. And there also wasn't a lot of content being put out from our perspective either. Like all the Instagram and the YouTube channels, as you're well aware, most of it, if it's talking about witchcraft, it's, some girl doing a makeup tutorial, and telling you another way to light a candle. How many ways can we learn to light candles, people? So it's, it's definitely something that I thought I wanted to contribute to that world, but I didn't want to publish something that was just regurgitating the same information. So if I was going to do it, I had to do it from an angle that was unique. And I do think I accomplished that by, don't start now. There's a delivery, so the dogs are, hearing it. So anyway, I apologize. I can't control my dogs, but he does love the camera. So as long as he's aware that we're there, then, he wants to be famous, really.
And we love dogs at my channel, so.
This is Tiki. He's a ham. But anyway, so that's why I wrote the book. I'm not an author by profession. I didn't go to school for writing. It's not my career aspiration. So don't expect me to be churning out books. I may, well, I probably will publish another one. However, I don't have plans to continuously do it. We do, the reason we started the publishing company, same reason, we own bookstores, and we actually are one of the most successful occult retailers in the United States, and sell a lot of books because of our locations being in Salem, Massachusetts, and New Orleans. They're both very big tourist locations, and they're also both very popular for the occult, right? So we really sell a lot of books. And that's actually quite remarkable, considering that bookstores really don't do well these days.
Yeah.
So we're not bookstores alone, but our books do very well because they're destination stores and because of subjects. But the current occult publishers, at least in the United States, I wanted to take a stance differing from, because we don't need to be a publishing company to make money, right? Yeah. So that's not where our success comes from. So we really didn't do it to make more money. We did it because we wanted to be able to build something to where the authors had credentials. So anything that we publish, we're making sure that the authors actually have credentials. So they've actually been trained, or they've actually gone to school, or they've actually, been through that occult. If they're going to write about voodoo, they need to have a history or initiation or something like that regarding that. Instead of somebody who just writes a book about witchcraft or something else, which is the majority of authors out there. The majority of authors out there today do not have credentials. And to me as a seeker, that matters. When I started my journey into witchcraft, just like everyone else, I was reading books. I sort of wanted to know who the author was. I wanted to know if they knew what they were talking about. I wanted to know their history. And certainly with the original witchcraft authors, from Gerald Gardner to Patricia Crowther, we knew who they were. We knew where they were training. We knew that there was a cohesive school of thought that they were writing about. Whereas today, it's more just somebody's unique experiment, really, right? Yeah. And sometimes you can get inspired by someone's unique experiment, but it's not necessarily, not everyone who can write should. True. Like I have no business writing a cookbook. I could write a cookbook, but I'm not really a cook. So why would I write on the subject? I find that should be true of anything, but when it comes to witchcraft, I think today it's an easy path, or the occult. It's an easy path for somebody who wants to be special, and especially if they want to, be famous. Especially if you can make it all up yourself. I mean, how fabulous is that? Throw on some eyeliner, get on Instagram, make it up as you go along, and light candles, and that works for people. And I'm not saying that makes them bad, but I certainly wanted to contribute something that was different. And I also was seeing a decline in the goddess being an important subject in the topic of witchcraft. Witchcraft was born in the modern world as a goddess religion. It was born as the first goddess religion in Western civilization within our modern, within our modern lives. Obviously, pre-Christianity, there were many goddess movements within the West, but they all went extinct. And so witchcraft was the first modern goddess movement to come forward with a priesthood, with a set of beliefs, and that's been forgotten in the narrative of witchcraft. I think in current content, I think the devil's more popular right now than the goddess, and I think it's misogyny at work, quite frankly. I think it's the most miraculous thing about witchcraft is the fact that it is a priesthood of the goddess that is successful and exists today all over the world, and it's a unique culture unto itself as well. And I just think that that's the most miraculous thing about it. And it's the least spoken about. So yes, I think I picked up the microphone because no one else was talking at the time, you know, and today we do have a few other people who are doing it. You know, we've got Thorne Mooney and Jason Mankey, who are both Gardnerians, and they're writing on the subject. But really, there's not a lot of initiates doing it right now.
Yeah, and you have a long history in the path of witchcraft, probably longer than you even want to admit. But,
That is true.
yeah. So you've been in the
Yeah.
game, and I think also because I've read Thorne's book, I'm really excited to get her second book. I've read Jason Mankey's books and also a lot about the old authors. But I think that still the topics that your book covers weren't met, you know, outside this book. So I think the need was highly there. And I agree, because you have the amazing foreword by Maxine Sanders herself in this book, which is, you know, first of all, amazing, but how she, you know, says also her opinion about the need for this book. And I fully agree as a seeker myself that this was surely needed. So thank you for creating it.
It, you know, it was an act of creation. And I think that I was sitting at a pub, a bar, and some gentleman was wearing a shirt. And I had the concept in my head to write the book. And this gentleman was wearing a shirt that said, "Don't be a writer, write." And it was like my wake-up call that I've got to put this, and I started, and it really only took me about 4 months to write the book once I got going.
Oh my God.
But the concept of the book was 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, because I am also a procrastinator. So, and it had to be an act of creation. And when the act of creation came through, it was everything from poetry to ritual to designing a pinnacle to designing sigils. It all came together. Even the photo shoot was a part of that act of creation. And regardless of what anyone thinks of the paperback picture of me, it certainly paid for itself. I don't think any cover in the history of any book on witchcraft has ever been talked about as much as that one. And, you know, there have been some great jokes about it, you know, Return of the Mummy and things like that that are quite funny, right? Seriously.
Yeah.
But it definitely did its trick. And it was, you know, it was a concept that I came up with. I wasn't overly happy with the photograph, but how often are we happy with our own photographs, really?
Never.
But the vision that we were going for did come through. So, and of course, about a year later, I did the hard copy. And of course, being a hard copy, I wanted it to have a classier cover, right? So it's just got the rose ink on it.
I love the hardcover. I was looking at it at the Hex website. Yeah. But at least for now, you didn't have the option to ship to Europe. So maybe one day we can order.
I think you guys can get it on Amazon.
I haven't seen it on Amazon. I've seen this on Amazon.
I think it is now on Amazon.
I'll need to check it out.
I'll have to double check that. But originally, Amazon wasn't offering the ability for hardbacks.
I love the look of it.
Yeah, I think Christian did find a way to do that, but I could be wrong. Yeah. So, but yes, shipping to Europe is something we really would like to be able to do more, but it's, you know, it's a work in, you know, I think it's becoming increasingly more popular. I did sell a lot of my books sold in the UK, which, you know, I mean, that's the British are very much like, we all want to go buy it. We're just not going to talk about it or admit it. And, you know, but they did. So, you know, but I mean, it's picking up everywhere. Also, just things like translating it into other languages and things like that. You never know when that's going to happen. But these books that we cherish I mean, I remember my very first books on witchcraft. There was a used bookstore in my hometown. And that's the books I first read were Patricia Crowther's and Gerald Gardner's. And they were all used books and they were all hardcovers. And that's why they were still around. So I always wanted my book to be hardcover because those are the books that last. You know?
But I'm amazed because, well, in the book you talk about that there's, you know, 30 years of, you know, practice behind the knowledge in these books, which truly shows. But the fact that you've done it in 4 months and you not being, an author, because even the language, because I don't know how it is for native English speakers. They might not think about things the same way as me as a Finn reading English books. But I love the language. I love that you haven't used overly fancy pantsy words the whole time that makes it harder for non-native speakers to read it. It's beautifully written and it's inspiring, and I can hear your voice in the book. And actually, this is a rare book about witchcraft because it actually works in the format of audiobook, because I have the paperback and the audiobook, and I love the reader in the audiobook because most of them actually truly suck, but he's really good.
Yes, he's very good. Didn't know anything about witchcraft. So, and he read that, because obviously the option had come out, do you want to read your own book? And no, I don't. It's not that I don't like my voice. I can't imagine having to have perfect diction reading an entire book, but he did a very excellent job. There were really no mistakes for the most part, and we had the option of what accent to even pick, and we intentionally selected BBC English.
I really love it because I like audiobooks a lot, and I actually listen to your book many times when I go to bed because I have trouble falling asleep. I put my AirPods on and I listen to your book because I've listened to it so many times that I don't need to concentrate anymore, but I just love his voice.
Yes, he's got a nice voice.
Yeah, but it truly works. But the whole content of the book, then there is parts of history, and general knowledge about witchcraft. But one new thing that I haven't seen in many books is that the kind of timeline and history of also lineage behind Alexandrian and Gardnerian branches of witchcraft.
One of the things that I discovered when I became an initiate was something that I don't think people on the outside get. They get the general idea is that, Gardner made up Wicca, and Alexandrian's a knockoff of Gardnerian Wicca and uses Kabbalah. I mean, that's generally like what people think. And, it's a very simplified version of the truth. Obviously we know that Gerald Gardner called his religion witchcraft. And in fact, he really did not publicly use the word that would become popular, Wicca, which was really more made popular by a man named Scott Cunningham, and who was published by Llewellyn's. I love the videos of Patricia Crowther where she goes, oh, I think Wicca's really a modern made up word. I mean, I guess it's okay now. It's all right. It's an okay word, because it really wasn't used. It was used as a way to show that it was an older word for the word witch. And it was a way to show that witchcraft was older than our concept, or the general public's concept of it was at the time, which indeed it is true. And Wicca, which I point out ad nauseum, is pronounced Witcha, if you pronounce it correctly. And it's just Old English. It's Old English, that's all it is. It's not even a different word. It's just literally a timeline of the same language. And it's not even a pre-Christian word. Old English was still within Christianity. So we don't really know the older roots of the words. I mean, you can go into the Nordic language and find it. You can go into the Germanic languages and find it. But that the history behind the journey to it becoming witch, we really just don't know, but we do know that the word witcha was used exactly in the same way that modern English uses the word witch. It was to describe both men and women who practice magic, but it was not a word for magic. Yeah. And that's the most interesting part, because in Old English, there were other words for magic, just like we have another word for magic today, so that's a long journey. But, I definitely think that, I think I'm babbling now, obviously, but I definitely think that it's the book's hypothesis is revisiting the truth of our history and also embracing the relevance of what is actually occurring.
Yeah.
I think we spend too much time on the past in the occult. I think people should be more focused on the now. Pan is one of my favorite examples. People have written great deals of information to explain how Pan was just an irrelevant god, and how Pan, doesn't mean all, or wasn't universal, or, whatever their point about Pan is going to be. And I think it's more interesting to say the fact that we're talking about Pan now says more about Pan than anything else you're saying.
True.
So I think that, I think Pan's very relevant today because he's one of those gods that, or an aspect of God that emerged, with the occult simultaneously. And that was the other hypothesis of the book, is I think that there's a delusion that has been born that witchcraft is somehow now separate from the occult world, when in fact we all came up together. A witchcraft came out of the occult, as a religion, yes, but it came up out of the occult.
Yeah, I love the chapters that you have on the goddess and also on the god of witchcraft. Those are, amazing chapters. But what I think that your book has unique in it, it talks about the concept of initiation. And, you take us back to the ancient mystery cults, which I find a, fantastic journey to take on. But I loved how you talked about the whole concept and the meaning of initiation. And that's something that I haven't read, because I've read tons of witchcraft books, but that was specifically the thing that I loved. And you question the reader, that you make us think that, are these the things that we truly want? And you make us really think. And that, I think, is an important skill as a writer.
Well, it's also just the experience of, I think that everything good about my book really is because I'm a priest, and because I've spent that life journey. I think, my husband was my publisher. I went through 3 editors because we were new to the game. So I had 3 editors on the book, and then Levi was, because Levi is actually a language teacher, so he's very, he was freelanced as a fact checker at the very end, and of course, so he read it, and thankfully he didn't have to correct a lot of things. But so I went through all this process, but Christian was stuck with being my, the only person that was going to push back against me right? At all. And it was really hard to convince me early on why I had to source things. Because I was like, why do I have to source anything? I know it all already. Yeah. And so the sourcing was more for other people, so that they could check my facts, right? So they could say, okay, this is where this information comes from. And I do think that's important when writing, but once again, I wasn't really a writer. But so I had the information, so it was more about digging it up again, which that's an endeavor to go, where did I learn that from? Yeah. As you were talking about the traditions, and I did sidetrack us, it was sort of eye-opening for me in my journey as an initiate to realize how you could take something like Gardnerian and realize that even within that umbrella, there is distinct differences, because that's how it's evolved through different lines. And Gardnerian witchcraft in particular has many different lines that developed distinctly, and so they don't practice exactly the same, particularly the American lines. And I think a lot of UK people learned a lot about, UK priesthood learned a lot about the American Gardnerian lines, which I had first accounts of because I have it in my upline. I'm not a practicing Gardnerian, but the families of initiation trees get very broad, because you've got people who've been initiated into more than one at some point in time, and so they pass on trickles of information. which can be interesting, but sometimes waters down the training. And then you have the lines that really work very strongly in preserving, what has been passed on as well. In Alexandria witchcraft, there's also distinction. There's less of it because, really, in my mind, the three lines you would get would be Maxine and Alex together and Maxine and Alex separate.
Yeah.
And I'm more a product now of the Temple of the Mother. So I'm really more of a product of Maxine in some ways than I am Alex. I get we're all a product of Alex, but I never met him, so I definitely, my priestess comes from the Temple of the Mother, the person who taught me primarily, because as you know, we, through our journeys, have several teachers. But my Obi-Wan Kenobi, Val Hughes, she comes from a priestess who was in the Temple of the Mother. So she was trained by somebody who was in the Temple of the Mother. And so that's, it's a very distinct in its own way. But the philosophies of Alexandrian Gardnerian witchcraft are also different in some ways. I think we have more in common than we do that's different, especially in comparison to other forms of witchcraft, I guess you could say. An Alexandrian and Gardnerian have a lot more in common than, say, an Alexandrian and a Cabot, or an Alexandrian and a Dianic feminist. We're practicing the same religion. We're just different castes. It's kind of like the difference between different castes of Catholicism. They might have different philosophies and school of thought, but it's still the same religion. So so it is interesting. However, is it complete in my book? Does it have every line and every detail of every line? Absolutely not. There are lines that aren't mentioned in there because I don't know enough about them, or I wasn't really sure if it was a thing at the time. And so it may get revised someday. And of course, there's things you can't say. There's lots of things you can't say.
Yeah. Well,
and that's the other challenge to writing a book about initiation and about traditions that are secret societies, is that we're not going to tell you any of the secrets. So, it's what you need to know from the outside to let you know that if you want in, really, I think.
Yeah, but I loved, because I think for me at least the list was interesting. It gives you kind of the perspective, no matter if it's like spot on. And I have to give it up for your husband for pushing you to source the book, because actually you have really nice reading list on the book, and also nice bibliography. So I highly respect that. So
I've been an avid occult reader for many years. I'm not going to say how many years, but for many years. And you do sometimes, I think we've all had that thing where you've got that piece of information and you're like, where did I get that from? And you're scoring through all these books. I guess I'm very lucky that I wrote a book in the age of the internet and got Google search and all those different things. So it was really easy to find things, versus, well, there were a few occasions where I was scoring through actual books in my library because I couldn't find them anywhere else. And I did learn things writing my book as well. First of all, I learned how to write, in the sense of how you have to do it. And I, had to learn the discipline of that. And I learned things about mystery cults and things I didn't know. The comparison with the mystery cults was important to me for two reasons. You may hear music coming by now because I live in New Orleans. So yeah, they have these bike things that happen at night sometimes, where these people get on bikes and they go riding around the city with stereo blasting. Yeah, it's a thing. It just went by. I was like, can they hear that? So
I just have to say, I think it's so amazing that you are there in, magical New Orleans at night, bikes going on, blasting music. And if I could show you I'm in the forest in Finland, in my cottage in the nature.
That's very magical.
And only birds here. So I think I love the contrast here, but sorry, keep on talking.
Yeah, New Orleans is a strange place because it's like a big city in a small town. It is very unique. But it's not the forest. It's not the magical forest. It's the magical swamp. So the mystery schools, paganism, what we call paganism, we often talk about, pre-Christian things, right? And you little, call my dog a little bastard here in a second. He's being very devilish. He's really working hard. And so I reached for him to grab him and he jumped off the bed. He's just trying to stay away from me, but still whine with the toy. He's bringing the toy to me now. Yes,
like,
bring
Daddy,
it here.
play with me.
He's trying to get me to come away from this. Is what it is.
Yes.
He's very manipulative. So the mystery schools, paganism, to keep my thoughts together. Paganism, we're often talking about, pre-Christian this and pre-Christian that. And what's really not realized, I think, in the history of the world is that by the time Christianity came around, most of Europe was well Romanized. So there are very few places in the world where you could escape full-on Romanization. You live in one of the places that did. Parts of the UK did, parts of the North did. However, they wouldn't have really escaped it because then they were, trading and exchanging with cultures that were Romanized, and eventually they would get Romanized again through the Catholic Church. But for the most part, most pre-Christian religion was being influenced by these mystery cults by the end of Christianity. And one such cult, which is one of my favorite to discuss, is the cult of Isis, where it was an initiatory European multicultural goddess at this point in time. She was far well removed from the original seat of the pharaohs goddess that she began as. She had traveled all through the world, first through the Greeks and then through the Romans. And this mystery cult extended all the way into Britain, where temples were built to Isis. Isis was a monotheistic goddess, and it was a religion, much in the way we would think of religion today. And it wasn't a cultural religion. So they weren't considering it an Egyptian religion. Yeah. They weren't considering it a Greek religion or a Roman religion. It was a religion of the great goddess. And from what we know about it, obviously Isis was the goddess of magic. Both men and women were able to be initiated into it. Slaves could be initiated into it, which is extremely rare. So it was very accepting, this religion, and it really mimics in many ways, or we mimic in many ways with witchcraft, the cult of Isis. The closest historical thing that you could really say is like modern witchcraft would have been the cult of Isis. We like to fantasize, oh, I'm a Scottish witch, or I'm a German witch, or I'm a Norse witch, or, there were many different religions. It wasn't like every ethnic group had one religion. Yeah. And I think we try to fantasize that, like the religion of the Vikings or the religion of the Greeks. It really wasn't like that, particularly the end. Different tribes had different gods, different families had different gods. And then, of course, there were priesthoods that we don't even know anything about. As you're probably well aware, we really don't know a whole lot about Germanic religions, and we don't really know that much about the Druids. They could have been more or less sophisticated than we think they were, but we do know about these mystery cults. And what fascinated me was when I reflected on the mystery cults in comparison to the modern mystery cults in the occult, whether you're talking about the Golden Dawn or whether you're talking about Masonry or witchcraft. Just like the mystery cults of old, there's a cross-pollination going on through initiation. So if you go and you track these mystery cults of old, you can go to Eleusis, you can go to the cult of Dionysus, you can go to the cult of Isis, and you can find that they're all interwoven with the same initiations. They passed and they all claimed, Eleusis said that its mysteries came from Egypt, and that was a theory of where their mysteries came from. And then, of course, you've got the Romans who are equating, Isis with Diana, and there's this merging going on there. The same thing happens in the occult. You've got everyone who founded the first Druidic order and the Golden Dawn were all Masons, and they were taking those initiations and transferring them into these new traditions. And as we're well aware, Gerald Gardner was a Mason. Gerald Gardner was also, technically speaking, a member of the OTO. We know that members of the New Forest Coven were in Rosicrucians and Co-Masons. So it just goes on, and it really is like there really is nothing new under the sun. The modern occult world functions very much like the old mystery cults functioned before it, you know, and it's all about that power of initiation, the golden chain of initiation. And it leaves one wondering if it's ever really truly been broken.
Yeah, but I think that this current environment that we live in, people are really detached from the broader perspective of initiation, because our, Western mundane lives lack a lot of initiatory, things. We don't have much of those. So I think that even in the occult world, some people might, find it a bit weird, this whole initiation, and to really truly committing to something in these days when you're supposed to be able to do whatever you want and say whatever you want and, just free flow everything. So I think it's really interesting time to be talking about the concept of initiation.
Well, I think it's really a part of our, not only our magical heritage, but our human heritage. And when we talk about reclaiming things, that are pre-Christian, initiation certainly is one of those things. I mean, it exists in its own way within Christianity, or within the other Abrahamic faiths. They have their own kind of rites of passage, but in those instances, it's very much about getting the blessing of someone else, really. Whereas initiation, although it does require people, it requires a community, it is about you.
Yeah.
This community is coming together and focusing on you for that time. And it's about your transformation, the thing that you're asking for. I think that what we run into a lot today, aside from the general problems of human ego, is the fact that people, they really hung up on labels, and so it's, they don't like the idea of, for instance, I'm a witch who believes in initiation. So therefore, if they're not initiated, I think I'm better than them, or I think that, they're less of a witch than I am, and that makes them feel insecure, really, quite frankly. It's their insecurity, not mine. The difference between an initiate and a non-initiate is that the initiate chose to be initiated.
Yes.
It's a choice that we make, and if you didn't make that choice, you don't have anything to apologize for. I don't think everyone should make that choice. I think there's also a confusion between the fact that being a witchcraft priest or priestess, an initiate, is different than just practicing the religion of witchcraft. If you're just wanting to go into your magical circle and worship the gods and work magic, and you don't want training and you don't need to define that anymore for yourself, that's perfectly acceptable. And it doesn't mean you're not going to be powerful, and it doesn't mean you're not going to have experiences, but it's not the vocation of a priesthood.
Yeah.
The vocation of a priesthood is about enshrining something, enshrining knowledge, passing it on, keeping that vehicle moving forward, and being a receptacle for the religious experience, and it's something that you build upon because you've got generations of wisdom going into these things and being passed forward. So when you're a part of that process, both magically through initiation and mentally through training and emotionally through the experience, you are being given, knowledge that would not easily be acquired by an individual. You're receiving lifetimes of knowledge. Whether you take it in or not, it's being offered. Every priest or priestess that's in that line has in some way contributed to it getting to you. And whatever you can soak up, and then you have the responsibility of passing that forward. that's a unique experience. It's not the same as dwelling in your own creativity, and I'm certainly an advocate of creativity. One of the things that was in my book that is not, wasn't something I wrote in 4 months is some of the poetry. All of the poetry and rituals in the book were written by me, except for the folklore spell, historical folklore spells.
Yeah.
Those were all written by me. And some of the poems were written years ago, in one of my various magical journals, and I selected some of them to go into the book. Because that's one of the things I enjoy doing. And my first witchcraft experience, which is by today's standards would be called traditional witchcraft, or as I make fun of it, call it witchcraft. It was a group of people who were practicing the religion of witchcraft. They had a coven, they were doing 3 degrees of initiation, they were working with they were carbon copies of Gardnerians and Alexandrians, but somebody had put it together at one point in time and they created their own sort of lineage. To me, it was just witchcraft though, and I was young, and we were practicing the religion of witchcraft. It's was very focused on sort of the Celtic thing, which I find typical of the 90s, really, dating myself a little bit. The 90s were obsessed with witchcraft being Celtic. It was just, that was the way it was. Everything was Celtic, Celtic, Celtic. And which, from my vantage point now, I find to be a ridiculous notion. Not that I'm anti-Celtic, but that it's all, or that it came from. In the UK, it's a place you can go in your brain, right? Because they were there, but they weren't the only people there. Have you ever noticed the British tried to ignore the Roman occupation? They tried to pretend I was actually speaking to someone, I won't name her, but she's, Brian, they weren't there for very long. I was like, they were there for 400 years.
Yeah.
That's longer than my country has existed.
Yeah.
So they were there for a long time. And, London is a Roman city. So it's, it really just goes to show that we are very happy with our delusions sometimes, but yes, so I'm not downgrading any of those personal experiences. Nobody starts out in the craft as an initiate.
No.
Nobody did.
No.
Yeah.
But I find it, refreshing to have a book written in a new perspective, and talking about also the fact of initiation. And you're not, saying that everybody should do it, and quite the opposite. And I love.
Well, I mean, I have seen, and you'll hear people like Maxine or other elders. I hate using the word elder. I had a new word I was trying to use and now it's escaped me, but people are accustomed to the word elder. I don't like calling people, I don't ever want to be called an elder. People have done it, and I'm like, no, pox upon you. Even when I'm really old, I don't want to be called an elder. It's supposed to denote honor and wisdom, but it comes from just the senior members of a coven. That's how it all, and now we just call all the people who started it elders, don't we? Pioneers, that's what I was going to call them, pioneers of the craft. But in any case, that will never stick. I can't, some of these words we won't.
Can try.
I'm fighting the pronunciation of Wicca to the end of my days. Levi says it's the hill I'm going to die on, partially because I'm combating the fact that it's become sort of a trend, or they tried to make a trend out of it, as in almost like initiates shouldn't call themselves witches. Like they're actually trying to take the word from us. And as I like to say, we gave them the word Wicca, we gave them that word, and then they started telling us how to use it. It's really quite the irony, we gave them the whole thing. That's the other fact that people don't really want to absorb, is that, regardless of what you feel about Jarl Gardner, he gave all of us this whole thing. Even if you're somebody who's like worshiping the devil in the forest of witchcraft right now, you still got it from Jarl Gardner. You just don't escape the influence of generations of what witchcraft has been, just because you are ignorant or choose to be ignorant of that history. It's a modern mystery cult, it's a fertility cult, it's a priesthood, it's a religion, and it has given itself to the world. Now people have embraced the label, it's become very popular, but they're not using it in the same way. It could just be casting spells, it could just be an aesthetic. It's become a political thing for many people, where they feel like they're, they're being a feminist rebel makes them a witch, really, and although I consider myself a feminist, yeah, I don't think that witchcraft is about that in itself. Witchcraft is about equality, and witchcraft is about the love of the other, as we'd like to say, and a lot of people just don't get that. There's a part of witchcraft that says, this isn't about you. You're only half the story, and whether the other half of that story is the gender you are not, or whether the other half of that story is the group of people that you've entered into, or whether it's the divine, or whether it's nature itself, you're always only half the story, but you're in the story, so I think a lot of people just miss the point of it. And we're not here to say who's a witch or who's not a witch. We're here to say that we're here for those people who are seeking the path of initiation, the path to the goddess, and yes, we're a magical religion, but magic is a gift to be used. It's not the main purpose. It's not the main point, of what I for me personally, I think that the greatest vocation that we offer is the goddess, because it's something that humanity is missing. It's the healing that needs to take place. If we fully integrated that goddess consciousness into the world, I don't think we would be on the verge of losing it. It's not that witchcraft is environmentalism. It's that anything that worships the other and respects the other is not going to cause harm. Because killing something else is killing yourself. I mean, essentially that's what we're saying, right? So the respect of the planet is it should be a no-brainer, but it's not really what's occurring, and we also don't seem to realize that, we talk a lot about people being persecuted, which race is the most persecuted race, which person is the most downtrodden. And today, in this day and age, women are the most persecuted people on the planet. We don't see that in the West because our women have equality, or at least are supposed to, right? But the West isn't the majority of the world. And so in most of the world, women are second-class citizens, and their husbands can kill them legally, so there's lots of things going on, or female circumcision, things like that. So when I think about, the goddess, and when I think about what witchcraft is offering to the world, it is that, for me, the other is the thing that I am not. Right? If yeah. I have been given the gift to create life, but I cannot do it on my own. Now I'm gay, so I don't want to, but I could. Yeah. The point is I could, but I couldn't do it on my own, and I couldn't do it with a carbon copy of myself, and it's not about love or sexuality. That's about the formula that nature gave us to create another life. Which is a miraculous power to have. But whatever designed this wanted us to know that that miraculous power could not be yours alone.
True.
I'm going on weird rants, right?
No, I love that. And that's one of the reasons why I love your YouTube channel, your show with Levi, at Covendom, because you never know when you start an episode where the roller coaster will take you.
Neither do we. Yeah, we don't know either.
Yeah, let's jump a bit back to the book. I'm just going to show to the camera there, if it shows well, that there's this grimoire part also in your book, where you talked about the sigils and poems. And by the way, I love the design or the layout. Sorry for my bad English, but how you use the fonts, the small images, pictures, and all the designs on these corresponding tables. I think they are so pretty, and so, because it doesn't matter, you have the information there, but if you can do it in a, cool way, why don't do it? So that's
Well,
amazing.
the layout and the design is completely Christian. Christian used to work for an ad agency. So one of the things he does for our company is that's really his gambit. He designs all of the labels, everything, all of our posters. That's him. And if you were to talk to him in private, he'd say that that's the thing that he offers. He always tells me if he ever died, that would be my biggest problem, is trying to replace that. So that marketing, but he is really, really good. And he did an excellent job as well in Levi's book. And Levi did, obviously, in the Art Cosmic, it's an astrological book, right?
Yeah, and here we have the copy of Levi's book. I've just started it because this is an astrology book. It takes longer time, for at least for me, to read, because I really need to take the time to read it. And once again, I love the concept also on Levi's book, that it's astrology book, but it's also linked with magic. It's a totally different type of book, but in this book we also have the same beautiful graphics whenever I find a nice page. So
When
I love
Christian was doing the layout for that book, I heard many times, "I'm never doing an astrology book again."
So here, just for you guys to see a table, but I love how your publishing house is also creating the end products.
Well, one of the things we really wanted to do, which is sort of a nod to the 70s, was put the authors on the cover, because Llewellyn and Weiser and some of the other companies do not do that anymore. And
I think
that's,
Levi is looking kind of weird.
he wouldn't do it. He refused.
No, Levi, why not? I would love to
He's
see
like,
it.
"I can't do it, Brian. I can't look at myself on the cover of a book." So yeah, so he got his way there. But that is something we were trying to bring back. People seem to like it. It's fun. You want to know who wrote the book, and I find pictures are worth 1,000 words. And one of the things I do is I have a couple of Facebook groups. One of them I started a few years ago, and it's called British Traditional Witchcraft for Seekers, or it used to be called For Seekers. I'm actually going to be changing the name here pretty soon, I think. But I used to always just post pictures of the old witches, Patricia Crowther, Alex and Maxine, things like that, just a photograph of them with their names, and it really had an effect on people, especially the younger generations who'd never seen that before. And you didn't have to explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen the pictures. You don't have to explain it. It tells you a story all on its own, So I think that pictures, whether it's on the cover or what have you, are just as important as the content of the book. Levi's book is really about religious classic astrology, and it puts you in touch with something that, and he does it in a way that is, once again, easily digestible, whether, if you're a layman or whatever, or new to astrology. He makes the terms very relatable. However, he doesn't water it down either, which is, obviously, he must have had a really brilliant teacher in the occult world, I think.
I think Levi seems, at least Levi seems so absolutely brilliant guy. I don't understand how smart he can be and so super funny at the same time. But one of the reasons actually that I really got so excited about the book is that I've been interested about the ancient ways of astrology and been studying Hellenistic astrology before this. So I'm finding it really refreshing that he has this angle on the ancient astrology. But about the pictures on the book, I think it was a brilliant move to put that picture of you on the cover of the book, because as a consumer of witchcraft literature, I go to Amazon or whatever place to find books, and if you write witchcraft or Wicca or whatever, it's like tons and tons of books, and they all have the same title, they all have the same looking cover, so you need to stand out. And I've seen comments on the internet that people no matter what their opinion about the cover was.
They're talking about it, yeah.
Yeah, they're talking about it. You got their attention. So, but if Levi ever writes another book, you have to keep pushing him.
We'll try. Yeah, astrology is a bit of a different subject though, but yeah, he's got some brilliant photographs because Levi does readings, so he definitely has done it. You know, but no, we couldn't talk him into it on the cover. But at least he did a nod to the 70s. I think that book cover really does kind of look like the old 70s, you know, cool 70s books.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, yeah, we miss the 70s in the modern occult world. I think we really do. Yeah. Oh, somebody did that with the cover of my book. I thought it was pretty funny. They made a meme out of me.
Did they?
Yes, with that book. And it was supposed to be mean, but I actually thought it was funny. It said, frozen in the 1970s, do not thaw. I never saw it. I was told about it. I thought it was, I laughed. I thought that was funny, actually. You know, I think that if you're practicing Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft, you should be a bit frozen in the 1970s, you know, because the religious beliefs and traditions that come from the 50s, really, or before, you know, but markedly from the 50s, they haven't changed. And if you don't believe in them, these aren't the priesthoods for you. Yeah. You know, that's just the way it is. You know, I didn't come into witchcraft and shape witchcraft around me. I came into witchcraft because it resonated with me, you know, and I think it's perfectly fine for us to all have our unique perspectives. And, you know, we're not absolutists. You know, most witches believe in reincarnation. Most witches also believe in other worlds, but we don't have any tightly held belief behind it. You know, it's not like we have some sort of system in place. You know, I think it's more of an inner knowing, an inner knowledge, you know, that everything that we need to know is put here before us on this earth, you know. And it's like, I think about strange things, you know, why do we sleep? Why do we dream? You know, and it's a little death, isn't it? You know, you go to sleep, usually you remember nothing, you know, and you just wake up and it's like you were dead and alive again. But sometimes you remember strange things and sometimes you forget pieces of it, you know, and it's much like, to me, almost nature's way of preparing us for this journey or reminding us of this journey that we're on. You're going to go sleep in a bigger way someday, but it's okay, you're going to wake up. Yeah. May or may not remember what happened in between. Yeah. There is. I mean, that could be insane, but I think everything's like that. I think that, you know, why we're biologically made male and female, you know, there's a challenge to it. You know, there's something it's teaching us. I don't think it's because, you know, I don't think it's just random that our biosphere of our planet has that pattern. You know, it would have been more efficient if we just all had babies without sex, really, honestly, you know. So there's no efficiency. All the fun. No, and you know, and that in that too, sex, you know, why does it feel so good? Something about love is supposed to feel very good. Something about the act of creation is supposed to feel very good. Obviously, it's biologically to get us to want to do it. I get that, but you know, I think that nature and our human experiences teach us a lot more than we think they do. You know, we like to make things more complicated than they really are. That's really true with humans, always. Yes. Always. Truly unnecessary. But you know, about the book, you made the sigil, all the talismans or pentagrams. How should one call those? I have the pentacle that I made, which I actually, the magic of that is it became a real thing. Yeah. So I actually had them made in silver and copper, and you can get them at our stores. They're beautiful. That's cool. I can't really find the right page now, but I really appreciate how much work has gone into that, and also all the designs. And the funny fact about the grimoire part is that it's really readable, and it also kind of works, flows really well. It's not like part of just lists. So I appreciate how things are structured
as a reader?
Well, the inspiration for that book was I was really ripping off Doreen Valente's Witchcraft for Tomorrow, because it was really always one of my favorite books. And at the very end of it, she has a little grimoire. If you haven't read it, you wouldn't know, but she has a little grimoire at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And I always just loved that. So I kind of was stealing that idea from her, but I also liked it because it makes it easier to reference. And I realized keenly that if people buy a book about witchcraft today, they want to have something to practice in it. You know, and I struggled with, obviously I'm not going to publish initiatory stuff. And I really am not a huge fan of like watered down versions of it. You know, like I'm not really a fan of like outer court groups, you know, in the sense that I don't think it's bad necessarily, but a lot of times in America anyway, they'll basically like have circles with these people that are like sad versions of the truth. And I think, why are you doing that? It's a waste of time. I get the sussing someone out. I understand all that, but I think there's different ways you could do it. So what I used is occult practices. And I think that that's a perfectly acceptable way of sussing someone out and can contribute to anyone who's on a magical journey. I mean, whether they end up becoming an initiate or not. And it's completely, you know, it's completely oath-bound stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, and then obviously I wanted to include some things that initiates could value, which is why I included some of my witchcraft poetry, because I wrote it myself. And some of it works really well in our rituals, you know. So, you know, it's kind of a plethora, but that stuff is all stuff that I actually use. Yeah. I'll say the middle pillar ritual, I do tend to usually just as a visualization. I don't tend to be vocal about it when I do that. It's not one of my main go-tos. And the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, is the ritual that inspires the salutation of the sun ritual. The mechanics are the same, but I do both of them. And in the course of writing that book, I've actually further developed that ritual in my own practice. So it's actually more elaborate now than when I published the book. Yeah. But it's an occult practice. You know, it's something that you could do whether you're a witch or not a witch, or whether you're an initiate or not initiate, and they work, which is why I was happy with including them in the book. You know, I could have just made, you know, okay witchcraft rituals, you know, but I don't see the point. And also, you can get them all kinds of places now. Yeah. You know, and anyone who comes to witchcraft nowadays, they've already been doing their own circles, haven't they? Yeah. You know, so even if it's not, you know, it's not close to home, they've already got something going on. So why give them a version that you're then going to replace with training? I've never understood it. Yeah. So I don't do that. So I function completely on instincts, but when I do work with people, I prefer it to be in more of an occult setting and not trying to mimic the craft. The craft for me is inside my circle.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, writing as an initiate is always hard because there are things that you can talk and then there are things that you can't talk. But I think that you really managed to create a well-rounded book that actually has a lot of good topics, a lot of good knowledge, good sections. I really enjoyed the goddess and the god parts. But then you talk about also some of the key concepts that are also included in majority of witchcraft books, but in a really fresh way. It doesn't feel like repetitive listing. So
well, that's the other challenge. I mean, you can't write a book about initiatory witchcraft and not address certain topics that have been addressed a million times before. Yeah. So I had to be creative and try to find a way to do it that hadn't been done before. With the god and the goddess, what I was trying to do, just like I did with the priesthood, is tell a story. And that story is, if you look into history, you can find comparisons of gods that very much influence or reflect what we feel about our gods today. But there is also the challenge of that we actually do have our own gods. Yeah. You know, and there is a secret name of the goddess. There is an identity surrounding the witchcraft god and the goddess. And that identity is well out of the bag in the sense that people have a general idea that she's associated with the moon and he's got horns. But I was trying to tell a story I was attempting to tell a story of our gods without crossing any lines.
Yeah.
And also those are just really, really important gods in the history of witchcraft on their own anyway. So I thought that was very important. Another statement that I've tried to really emphasize with people that I think is more important now today than ever is that witchcraft is not an ethnic faith. Witchcraft is a mystery tradition. It's a fertility cult. You enter into it through initiation, not because you're born into any race or culture or place. I do know that there are some British who've built it up in their minds, and rightfully so, in the sense that it does come from Britain in the modern world, but the literature and the ideas behind it do not come from Britain.
Yeah.
In the craft, we do worship a monotheistic goddess. You don't have to be an initiate to glean that. You could just read, and we're not practicing a polytheistic faith either. Obviously there are some people who've transferred that in their mind, but the original literature, it's not polytheistic. We're not worshiping a bunch of, as I've said, action figures. They're aspects of this greater thing. And that's important, I think, more today because of the fact that we are dealing with so many racial issues. And I think that a lot of people sometimes cross the line when they create an ethnic oriented group, that they are kind of headed the way of fascism, like this is a white only religion or something like that. Witches have always believed in reincarnation. And if you really believe in reincarnation, this doesn't account for very much, and we're not an ancestral faith either. Just because things have become popular in the magical world, which right now, through the 90s, it was very much about, and I blame Llewellyn for this because it was another way to publish books. I'm not trying to bash on Llewellyn because they've done a lot of good things too. When you get big, you do a lot of good things and you make a lot of mistakes. But it got really popular to be like, Scottish witchcraft, Irish witchcraft, German witchcraft, and it was just another way to churn out books because they'd run out of traditions. So they just started, but it really took root in the occult pagan movement, where it's still going on today, where people will identify with whatever ethnic culture they feel they are a part of and try to reclaim it in the name of witchcraft. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with exploring your pre-Christian ethnic roots. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I like to do that, and I do it with other people's too. But I am a little bit Egyptian, but not enough to really matter. Levi doesn't believe me, but he says it's not a true science yet, Brian. The DNA thing's not a true science. I said, don't be jealous. It's really about the fact that, witchcraft is, I think it's really important that people understand how inclusive it is. And people try to find ways to make it uninclusive. However, yes, it is a religious set of beliefs.
Yes.
So we do have beliefs. And if you don't believe those things, well, it's just not for you. They're not going to change. People will modify witchcraft. They have modified witchcraft. They will continue to modify witchcraft. However, the original traditions will continue to exist. The same thing has happened with Catholicism. We've had Christianity multiply and diversify and change and twist over the years into many, many different things, but it didn't stop Catholicism. Catholicism still exists. So people are still learning Latin, even if it's not the popular way to say mass, it's still a thing.
And I love how you and Levi have tackled this subject actually several times in your YouTube episodes about people trying to blame initiatory witchcraft of, things that you can't really, you can't blame a church of having a priest or having a cross or Jesus on the wall. It's like ridiculous things. And I love how you really talk about it and face those conversations, even though
It's
they
not
are
going to be
ridiculous.
for everyone, and people get weirded out, they see, the nudity, that's really strange for a lot of people. They see pictures of our practices they don't understand.
Yeah.
It's very strange to them. It might be scary, it might be triggering for them, and that's okay. There's plenty of things I see in other religions that are scary and triggering to me. I'm not bashing on Muslims, but I'm never going to be one because I don't believe the way they believe. It's just not something I resonate with. And that's, it's true. One of my close friends here in New Orleans is a voodoo priest, and I had to say to him one day, because he gets sort of a little bit riley when I talk about witchcraft and animal sacrifice, because I'm like, witches do not sacrifice animals, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's just, the fact that I even have to say that today is strange, but you still have to say it. And, he gets a little uncomfortable because in his religion, you do sacrifice animals. Yeah. And I finally had to look at him one day. I said, Kirk, you're just going to have to accept, sorry, I said the name. I said, you're just going to have to accept that I don't agree with all your beliefs. If I did, I'd be practicing your religion.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to get into that topic right now, but the point of it is that doesn't mean that I don't respect it. I respect it a lot more than I respect other religions. I think that there's a lot of very interesting things about it, but it's not my set of belief systems. No. And if no religion reflected my belief systems, I wouldn't have a religion. And you don't have to have one. So but no, people want to, they want to shape it. And even people on the inside do that, unfortunately, and I get that. They're not doing it for coming from a bad place. They're doing it because they think they're right, or they're doing it because they're misled. But, and I'm sure there's people who probably think I'm doing that. It is what it is. But, I think it's just really important to understand that this has been going on long enough that it is very well established. By the time I came onto the scene, this thing was very well established by generations and lifetimes, and there have been, so many lives and people who have contributed to the craft, whose names you will never know, True. Whose photos you will never see, but they're there. And when you're involved, you get to hear their stories, and some of them I don't like, but they still contribute.
It would be impossible to find any group of people where we would, just like everybody.
And I always say that too, it's like, I don't know if I would have liked Alex Sanders. I never met him.
Sure.
I never met him, so how would I know? I don't know if I would have liked Gerald Gardner. I don't know if I would have liked any of them. I imagine I would have, because we have a lot in common. I know I like Maxine because I've met her. I've had conversations with her, now many. So she's a real person to me. She's not just a mythological character. Some of the other ones are mythological characters, because we've never met them. And we do that, especially in America. That is a part of our culture, is that we really like to feel like we own celebrity. We love to see them rise. We love to see them fall. And we love to believe that we are in their heads, and that's true of the witchcraft elders as well. They feel very, I remember once that somebody got very angry because I said I wasn't really particularly inspired by Gerald Gardner. He wasn't, him as an individual never really inspired me. He inspires me in the sense that I give him great credit for being the one that was chosen to bring this forward. I think he was chosen to do the most important work, but like his personal presence or his books were not the things that really resonated with me. Yeah. Patricia Crowther totally inspired me. Doreen Valiente totally inspired me. Alex and Maxine, from their photos alone, totally inspired me. You know, What Witches Do was one of my favorite books, and I also got it from that same little used bookstore.
I love that too. I
The
found the
original.
used
You have to get the original edition. Most people don't know that the second edition that was put out, second or a later edition that was put out, you have to get it used now because the Ferrars actually edited a lot of the original content out.
Yeah, I have
yeah.
and you can't even. There is no current copy of it. There's only used copy, but I've only managed to find the second printout. I haven't found I don't think mine is the first version. Not sure. But.
There's two different ones that are with two different photographs. I got mine, luckily it was at that used bookstore, and the one I have is the one where Alex and Maxine, I think, are consecrating wine on the cover, but there's another one where they're not. And it's my understanding, because I've actually never read the newer one, that they edited Maxine out of the book. You know, it's basically what happened. Yeah.
Could be kind of I've just read in a short period of time all the books about Alexander's, Maxine's book, and then some Stuart Farrar's books. So when you, as you said, while writing your book, when you read enough, you start mixing what book was what. So
yeah, it does happen.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people have, you know, done some, you know, I have reading lists out there. Like, I think that as a religious movement, the fact that we've had so many priesthood write books, none of them were authors. You know, that's the whole thing. Stuart was. I think Stuart's the only one that was. Thorne Mooney went to school for it. She actually works for a publishing company, or something like that. So, you know, we've had a couple, but really, Doreen was a fabulous writer, but that was not her occupation in life. You know, she was really good. I think she was just highly educated. But yeah, we've had so many crazy birds like myself put out a book, you know, that it's amazing, because what people don't realize is all the original books on witchcraft that were published were written by initiates. You know, it was all Gardnerians and Alexandrians. And when I came into the craft, as a person reading books, everything that was being presented as content in regards to witchcraft was all sharing that vision. So I was, you know, I did get exposed to like a couple crazy like spell books and stuff with some wacko jacko, you know, but for the most part, it was all like witchcraft's a religion, you know, here's the god and the goddess. And it was really stuff with really good content, you know, and then all of a sudden you started seeing it get watered down and watered down and watered down. It was just because they were turning it had become so popular for a while, and they were turning out so many books. And you had all of a sudden in America, you had huge bookstore chains pop up, and they would have giant occult sections, and they were replacing local occult stores. It didn't last, but, you know, because those chains are all folding now, you know, because people don't go in and buy books anymore. So, yeah, it's really interesting. So, and you've got today's day and age, you've got people who don't know who Gerald Gardner, Alexander's, Doreen, they don't know who any of them are.
That sounds sad. That sounds sad.
Yeah.
But I think as a consumer, it's even harder today to really find the really good books, because if people are just starting out and they go into Amazon or big places like that and try to search like books about Wicca, for example, there's so many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those. I don't know what type of books those are, but like really repetitive and weird, and you know, I don't know who the authors are, but there's
even a group of books that are being written, and I can't really out it because I can't think of what it is right now, but it's a real thing. There was a series of witchcraft books being put out that were by like fake authors.
It looks,
they weren't even real people.
Weird.
It was a collection of information from some company. They were churning out books, and they were like made up author names, and people actually think they're real people. They weren't even real people.
Yeah.
So it's really weird. But yeah, it's become popular. My advice to anyone, obviously, you know, it's great to read new content. I would say find their credentials, you know, and I'd say that with any occult book, not just witchcraft. First, if you're going to pick up a book, find out who the author is, not about whether you like the author or your friend likes the author, or, you know, because I'm sure plenty of people have a love-hate relationship with me, but it's the credentials of the author that you should be questioning first. You know, if I'm going to a doctor, I want to know that he went to medical school and that he doesn't have a bunch of lawsuits against him for malpractice. You know, I'm not interested in whether he's a nice person. I'm not interested in whether he'd be my friend. I'm interested in that. And I think a lot of the newer generation, they go to content creators and they're more into the celebrity aspect of the content than they are the content. So I'd say find out who the author is, and I'd highly recommend that if you are interested in studying witchcraft, that you read all of those original books, because it may be harder to find some of them, but there's a lot of them. You know, Patricia Crowther wrote a lot of books. Lois Bourne wrote a couple books. I actually have one of Lois Bourne that I got when I was in the UK. I still haven't read it, sorry. And it was just funny because I've read all of them. I just, for some reason, have not got around to that one yet. But that's how many of them there are, you know, and I would have sworn at one point in time, I would have read all of them, you know. Got Gerald Gardner's 4 books really you can read, because he's got High Magic's Aid as well, which is a very valuable book to read. And he's got A Goddess Arrives, which all kind of gets you into his head outside of his witchcraft books. Now, I'll be honest, Gerald Gardner was a horrible writer, but you should still read his books. You know, they're bad, but they're important. They're just important. Yeah. And you do learn things from them, you know, but read all of the books that you can get from before the 80s, really, right? And if you read those books, you'll have a hard time finding better books than what was written by those people.
But it's sometimes, I personally need to read one old book, like one Gerald Gardner or half Gerald Gardner, and then a new book, and then the rest of the half, because at least I struggle a lot, not just about the writing, but also the language. It is so much older, the English, and it gets harder and harder to read, because your book is kind of thick, but I can gulp through it like really fast.
That's easy read. Yeah,
because the language just sinks in better. But I don't know, they are harder to read.
Well, when you're writing a book, the biggest thing you can do when you're writing a book is realize that you're just talking to people through words.
Yeah.
So you have to find your voice, the voice that you already have. And that's the voice that I maintain through the book. It'd be no difference than watching Covendom, really. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's a little more organized in thought, but you know, I don't go on rants as much. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, I highly encourage that people read new books, because it's just that it's harder to find good ones, you know, especially the more you read. And what's important about it is there are things we know now that Gerald Gardner didn't know. You know, there are things we know now that Doreen Valiente didn't know. And so if those things are, or at least they didn't tackle them, if those things are addressed, it's great. You know, like for instance, and this is just my opinion, but I don't think Gerald or Alex knew how to pronounce Wicca. You know, they read it just like everyone else, you know, and so people started saying it the way that it looked like it was said, and it caught on. You know, I don't know who's responsible for the pronunciation, because we just don't know. You know, I'm going to assume it was Gardner, but you know, it wouldn't have been pronounced that way. We know that for a fact now. So in my mind, you know, when I learn how to pronounce something correctly, I cannot excuse myself because it's easier, or because so many people are doing it. I think there's this idea of, well, this is how it is now. No, a mass delusion or a mass mistake doesn't make it relevant. And where it serves my purpose, I suppose, is I prefer the word witch anyway. Yeah. And that education that education just teaches us that is the word. You know, once you change it to witcher, it becomes pretty irrelevant to say it, doesn't it? You know, but it makes sense because it would have been an accent, and it probably would have had a bit of a German tone to it as well, you know, so it probably wouldn't have been exactly one note depending on where you lived, right? Because we know that Old English was Germanic language influenced by Frisian, which I'm not really an expert, but so there's a crossover there. It was unique. What they were speaking in England was unto itself. It evolved unto itself, but the roots are interesting. It's all interesting, but it just helps bring it home. Either way, you're speaking English. Like I stopped saying Anglo-Saxon the day that I realized that Old English and Anglo-Saxon are the same thing. You know, the day that I realized that, I stopped saying Anglo-Saxon, because Anglo-Saxon creates an illusion of it being older than it is.
Yeah.
You know, and so people think, oh, Anglo-Saxon, that's pre-Christian. No, it's Old English, you know, and they were well Christianized when it was being spoken. So, you know, there we go. The Germanic languages are pre-Christian, as you're well aware, but Old English is not. So.
But I think it's getting kind of late for you up there in New Orleans.
Yes, we did a late nighter for me, you know.
I
Almost
have
the
my
witching
own.
hour here. Yeah.
True. And, you know, I really want to thank you for taking the time to come into my teeny tiny channel. I highly appreciate that. And I will also put all the links that I know of Covendom to Hex, and I'll also try to find if the hardcover book is available to Europe and in, you know, on the website.
I
So
think it's on Amazon now. I think
I'll
it is
check.
on Amazon
I'll
now.
check. And I'll link all those down below. And what are all the other places where people can find you, your social media outside of the YouTube channel?
Well, Covendom's weird because Covendom started out as a YouTube channel show, and then we changed platforms, which I have to apologize to everyone because I can't even remember the platform now on the top of my head. Christian and Brian were actually out on the town until 6 a.m. last night, so I am not in my 20s anymore. So I'm a bit tired. So if I rambled extra, that's probably why. So I definitely get more views on Facebook, because when we do the show, it's actually streaming to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. I'll have to tell you the medium in case you ever want to try it. It's a really good system. And that comments, people can be commenting on any of your Facebook pages or on YouTube, and we see the comments in one place.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go looking for it. But because the downside is because a lot of people watch it on Facebook, we don't get the credit for it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's sort of, in a way, you know, it's kind of what it is. We get a lot more views than it looks like we do,
Yeah.
but I try to promote people to go to the YouTube channel. So Covendom is obviously a place. I have the British Traditional Witchcraft page on Facebook, which is really about Gardnerian and Alexander witchcraft. It was set up as a seekers group, partially because I disliked the behavior of the other seeker groups on Facebook, which I continue to dislike to this day. It may be going through a facelift here very soon, because I've had some ideas, and I've quite frankly gotten bored with it years ago, you know. So I think it's still relative. It's still, you know, just like any of them. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, honestly, these days. But it serves its purpose, and it has lots of benefits. I mean, I've been connected with some really wonderful people. Unfortunately, it connects you to people that you don't want to be connected with too. So it has its dark side. So you can find me there. Obviously, we do 2 festivals a year. We have Hex Fest coming up here, and that's the 6th through the 9th of August. And then we have the Festival of the Dead, which is a month-long festival in October in Salem. So I attend both of those. You can find me there.
Are you still online with the Hex Fest, or is it?
No, it will be in person this year.
Cool.
So our country has really opened up because of so many vaccines being put out. Well over half our population is vaccinated now, and the people that aren't vaccinated are primarily by choice, not because they don't have access to it, which is weird because I know some of our Canadian friends still can't even get the vaccine yet. So America bought a lot of the vaccine, guys, sorry. And hopefully we'll share. Hopefully we'll share, since some of our people don't want to use it. But it's coming to that point to where it's like they're just opening things up, and hopefully that continues to happen. But yes, so we are going to be in person. I believe the vaccine is required to attend. Because we had a kind of a choice between either making everyone wear masks or requiring the vaccine. So.
Yeah, and I can highly recommend, if there are viewers who are interested about Alexandrian initiatory witchcraft, if you haven't checked Brian's and Levi's episodes in Covendom, I will link it down below, and just they are, you know, they can be 2 hours, and I listen to you guys all the time when I'm driving, because I put the YouTube on and just listen, because I can never attend lives, because when you go live, it's like
That's
3 a.m. here, and I'm old. I'm too old to be up at that time. But I love that you're taking your time, that they are the long episodes, and I think it's the best stand-up comedy also, at the same time of being highly educative and interesting, because you guys are sometimes so funny. I don't know if that's intended, but you're just naturally so super
Well, I think
funny.
we wanted it to be fun, but we also have fun doing it, you know, and sometimes I'm drunk.
That's good. That's good to be drunk on YouTube. I respect that, and I think that the chemistry between you two, it works fine. I'm interested to see, because if I understood correctly, that the next season that you're starting after
Mhm.
summer, or when is it? That is going to be 3 of you there.
Yes, Ellie Barnes is going to be joining us. You know, and some people are like, I mean, people will love Ellie. She'll bring something great to the show because she's as kooky as we are. But you know, we've done it now for three. We agreed to do like 12 episodes, called it a season. Then we did a second one, and we just kept taking it place. So after this one, we're like, man, we're running out of ideas. You know, what do we? Because we turned it into a call-in show, and that was kind of fun. And we're
That's
like,
so fun sometimes.
yeah.
That's so
And
fun.
I'm like, well, what are we going to do for this next one? And we decided to invite Ellie and have a third co-host. You know, it is going to change the dynamic because there's going to be three of us, and you know, so there's more voices. But we wanted to add, honestly, a female perspective.
That's good.
You know, and my high priestess at the time, she's a very high profile corporate executive. So she really just couldn't ever commit to doing the show, which is how I got on the show with Levi. Otherwise, it would have been me and her.
Yeah.
And so I needed a co-host, and Levi was willing to do it. And Christian thought me and Levi would have good dynamics, and we did.
Works.
Yeah, but Ellie and Levi actually used to do like a private show with each other, and it was just when we were traveling, and they were sending it only to the coven. They would never let it show anywhere, and it was just so funny. You know, so maybe the secret is Levi being with a crazy person. That's what possibly, like, he's got to corral us, you know, make it work.
I love
but
the funniest parts are when you're in the middle of rant, you obviously can't even hear what Levi is saying, and he's whispering to the mic something really funny. It's so cracks me up all the time. Amazing.
Yeah, he's fun. But yeah, you know, adding in a new perspective and just seeing where it goes, you know. Yeah. So we're gonna try it out. Ellie's one of my favorite priestesses. She's extremely brilliant. She's an extremely brilliant occultist, but she's also funny, you know. So
it's good.
It'll be fun. And she might steal the show and just take it away from us because.
True.
You know, did you notice how much she liked that camera? Like, we weren't there. She's like, I consider myself very well loved, you know. But anyway, thank you for having me on here. I will definitely look up your channel because I wasn't quite sure where to find you because we met on Instagram. Yeah. So I wasn't quite sure. And I know they do have those Instagram shows. I don't understand the Instagram shows.
I'm almost, I know we are the same generation.
I don't know if you watch them. I'm like, where are they? I don't know.
So yeah. I don't. For me, even to be able to have a YouTube channel is, you know, super good, but I don't do TikToks or Snapchats or.
I love YouTube. I think it's so great because of the archive it gives us. Yeah. You know, there's so much good information on there. There's really a lot of old BTW videos and things you can find on there as well. So.
Because without the YouTube, I wouldn't have found, because I just listened continuously all of your episodes, because when you find one, then you have them all there. One thing that someone could do actually to the channel for Hex is to create an own, what you call it, file or file for the Covendom episodes, because there are, you know, other episodes there also, but they are really easy to find, and I'll link it down below.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on. Hopefully we'll get to meet up someday.
I really hope to come.
If you ever come to New Orleans, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You never know.
Experience that. And thank you, everybody, the viewers. If you have any comments or questions, put them down below and let's see what we can do with those. But Until next time. Bye, guys.